Plan on flying? In order to board domestic flights, your driver's license or state-issued ID must be a real ID. Learn how to get your real ID today at tsa.gov/real ID or visit your local DMV.
So, did you hear about Jen Shaw?
No, I didn't hear about Jen Shaw.
How about Erica? Did you hear about Erica?
I don't think so.
What about that fraud shit from the other day?
Can you be more specific?
There's so much fraud out there and so much shenanigans. You should just tune into Book of Lies podcast.
Book of Lies podcast.
Every week we talk about some fraud, some scams, and maybe even some TV shows.
Where there are scams.
Yes, of course. Scams, frauds, and all those things. So tune in every week where we'll bring you a new topic of...
Scams?
That's right. Scams.
So tune in on your favorite podcatcher to catch up on the latest liars, cheaters, thieves, and dirty, rotten scoundrels.
That's right. See you soon.
Bye!
Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Paige, and you're listening to Reverie True Crime.
You feel betrayed by Tyra?
Oh, yes. I mean, I think it's sad that she didn't say it was self-defense when she knew it was self-defense. But then again, see, I don't understand because, see, I don't know. I think the cops threatened her. I said, look, you're going to get first-degree murder. You're going to go to prison the rest of your life. You might even go on death row with her.
There are so many ways that this introduction could go. I sat back and considered how to go about introducing the information I worked hard to collect. The reality is, there is no good way to introduce a lot of this. But, just like I will be peeling back the curtain on our justice system through the lens of Aileen Wuornos' case, I have decided to pull back the wizard's curtain and break the fourth wall of podcasting. This world is not black and white. Many like to say they would like to go back to when the world was in black and white. Whether it be television, the talkies, or what they deem to be easier times. But there are no such things as easier times. The world, its people, we are nuanced. We are shades of gray. The only black and white that we have to experience in this world is science. But even shades of gray have an unbridled beauty to them. There is poetry in investigating these tints, tones, and yes, shades. This is why world, national, and local events never just gel with the law. The law is written in black and white, on white paper, in terminology that would make the average person see stars. Laws are written to apply to a black and white world. Why? Because shades of gray are hard to contain. Shades of gray can find themselves in trouble ill-defined by the black and white laws we set permanently in what we have found through time to be a cracked foundation of society at best. So, shades of gray. Just like those shades, the law of self-defense can only be defined as a gray area. Why? Well, it depends on where you live, where the crime was committed, who you are, and what you do, your socioeconomic status, the type of crime committed, the environment it was committed in, the weapon used. I think you see where I'm going with this. Homicide. All murders are homicides, but not all homicides are murders. This is a distinction that would be best for us to consider before launching into the episode. Homicide does, in fact, include murder, but it also includes self-defense and lawful killing. I want to be sure that you, dear listener, know that murder is never okay. But, in the eyes of the law, it can be justified, sometimes necessary for survival. Justified. What could possibly lead to homicide being justified? According to the law, a killing without evil or criminal intent is justified. Also included in this are accidental shootings. We mentioned the concept of self-defense. This will play a large part in the case of Aileen Wuornos. When one uses force to protect themselves from attempted injury by another, self-defense is in play. It is, in fact, legal to kill someone who tries to rape and/or kill you. When you take justified and connect it to self-defense, you come out with a tag team that creates all kinds of questions and leads to a distorted plot. A plot the jury has to unravel. Juries examine what a reasonable person would have done in the defendant's situation. Was deadly force absolutely necessary? They must agree that beyond a reasonable doubt it was or was not. Your fate lies in the hands and interpretations of people who were not there and who did not physically, psychologically, or otherwise know what you felt and went through. What you felt was in that moment. What you felt was unique to you. Not even a jury of your peers can understand that, but they don't have to understand that from a human perspective. They have to understand it from a legal perspective. The standard is low to present evidence. Even a shred of evidence works in your favor. It doesn't matter how weak your theory is or how unlikely it is. With no evidence provided, the jury will not be given instructions on self-defense. In addition, the defendant will be limited in their closing argument as far as challenging the evidence of the state and denying that the incident took place. What this means is, if the concept of self-defense was not brought up during the defense's case, they cannot respond to the prosecution's case in closing arguments with just that thing. It would be the equivalent of saying, "No," or "your mama," after being insulted. It carries little to no weight, and there will be an objection, and it will be sustained. In addition, you will not have a self-defense claim if acting out of anger after the alleged attacker or aggressor is walking away. You see, nuances, gray areas. In Florida, self-defense is not available to anyone attempting to, committing, or escaping after a forcible felony. If you provoked violence, you have no self-defense claim. However, if in good faith you withdrew from physical contact, or if you clearly indicated to the other person you wanted to back away and not use force, or despite doing the first two things, the other person resumed use of force, you then have a possible claim. You see, nuances. Gray areas. Aileen Wuornos, as we will find out, will utilize this very argument. She will attempt to bring the jury along on a journey. But it's important to remember throughout this entire episode the concept of self-defense. It's important to consider what that means in this case. It's important. It's just as important now as it was back then. Above all else, one has to balance the idea of legal self-defense with the concept that lying is the elementary form of self-defense. With all of that being said, let's get into it. Eileen's lover and best friend, Tyria Moore, would eventually make the decision to leave the state of Florida. She loved Aileen, but her recent confession made it impossible for her to stay. Once Aileen confessed to shooting and killing a man, it was the beginning of the end to their relationship. At first, Tyria was in denial. She didn't think Aileen was actually capable of doing something so horrific. It was completely out of character for the woman she knew and loved. A year later, she made the decision to leave the relationship out of fear that it was true. Later, she would tell the police, quote, "I told her I didn't want to hear about it, and then anytime she would come home after that and say certain things, telling me about where she got something, I'd say I don't want to hear it." Who was this man she told Tyria she had killed in self-defense? What were the specific details of the event, according to Aileen? We're going to delve into the details from both Eileen's perspective and also from the investigator's perspective. As you might have guessed, both tell the events differently. Aileen is telling her version of the truth through her own lens of a lifetime of abuse, and the police are telling it from information they gathered through interviews and direct evidence. It's possible neither are correct. Richard Mallory was 51 years old at the time of his death. He was an electronics shop owner from Palm Harbor. He was known for being a lone wolf, often disappearing for a few days while on alcohol and sex binges. Richard seemed to be a paranoid person for many reasons, one being he changed the locks on his apartment almost 10 times in 3 years. Since he was known to go off and do his own thing for days at a time, no one thought much of it when he didn't show up to work that December morning of 1989. Richard was not particularly close with anyone, so unfortunately, nobody realized he was missing at first. A former employee of Richard's said he was, quote, mentally unwell and pussy crazy. We know he had been divorced 5 times and was known to be continuously nursing a bottle of beer. Friends and colleagues described him as paranoid and obsessed with porn and topless bars. At first, the police somehow came up empty when they searched Richard's records. That is, until Aileen was on death row. That is when we would find out that Richard had a sordid past. A few years prior to his death, Richard had been convicted of attempted rape in the state of Maryland, which lends credibility to Eileen's allegation that he had tried to sexually assault her. Aileen was working the streets as she normally did on the morning of November 30th, 1989, when Richard picked her up while she was hitchhiking. Before sunrise, they went to an isolated, wooded area to have sex. The two had one drink after another, getting high and hanging out together for 5 hours. This is when Aileen began to remove her clothing. However, Richard only wanted to unzip his pants. Apparently, he didn't feel like this was an event that called for getting completely undressed. This would also explain his state of dress in the crime scene photos. That's when Aileen discovered that Richard did not have the money to pay for her services. Now, I just want to interject that most sex workers take care of the money part before removing their clothing. So this is the part where Eileen's recollection differs from custom and practice. When she realized he was not intending on paying her, she reached for her clothes, and as she did so, she claimed Richard whipped a cord around her neck, threatening to kill her, and allegedly said, quote, "like the other sluts I've done." He allegedly tied her hands to the steering wheel, and as he did, Aileen had an overwhelming gut feeling that Richard was about to take all the money she had and rape her. In later interviews, she said that Richard sodomized her and raped her vaginally as well, and as she cried out, he got off on every minute of her agony. Afterwards, he took rubbing alcohol to his penis, cleaning off the blood from it. Then he squeezed the bottle, squirting it onto Aileen's ripped, bloody rectum and vagina. This was in an effort to destroy evidence of his assault. According to Aileen's version of events, Richard finally began to untie Aileen and demanded that she lay down. He stated, quote, "You're dead, bitch, you're dead." Aileen said she knew she was about to die. She always carried a gun on her for protection purposes, concealed in her purse. She lunged for her purse, and the tussle between Aileen and Richard commenced. Aileen was victorious in getting the gun, aiming it at Richard, saying, quote, "You son of a bitch, I knew you were going to rape me." And he replied, "No, I wasn't. No, I wasn't." Aileen kept warning him over and over that if he didn't stop trying to attack her, she was going to shoot him. But he just wouldn't stop. He kept lunging for her and trying to get the gun. Aileen told police she shot Richard at least once while he was sitting behind the wheel of his car. He opened the door to crawl his way out of the driver's side, falling to the ground, but eventually he hobbled his way back up onto his feet. Aileen took off running to the front of the car because he was coming at her. She fired another shot, which made Richard hit the ground. While he was lying there, Aileen shot him 2 more times. Afterwards, she scrounged through his pockets for items to pawn, and later some of his belongings were discovered in a storage unit that Aileen rented. When discussing the disposal of Richard's body, she stated with intensity that she was doing him a favor.
He said, "You better do what I say or I'm going to kill you." He said, "It doesn't matter to me. Your body will still be warm. I'll kill you right now. I'll screw you later."
But then Wuornos says she turned the tables. He untied her, she got her gun, and shot him 4 times. Well, let me ask you, in your opinion, did Richard Mallory deserve to die?
Okay. For what he did to me, the way he tortured me and everything, yes. Yes, he did. But, how can I explain this? Yes, he did deserve to die, but the way I left him was so kind, because the way he was going to leave me, I'm sure, would not have been this way. He would have left me probably dismembered, scattered out in the woods.
So you feel...
I left him with a rug over him so the vultures wouldn't get him.
But you left him dead.
That's right.
After Aileen had covered his body, she hopped into the driver's seat of his car and sped away to the shabby motel where she would face Tyria. The question is, would she be able to look Tyria in the eyes and tell her what she had done? Aileen staggered into the motel, and by Tyria's accounts, they had planned on moving soon, so the few things they did own were mostly packed already. They began loading up the rest of their belongings into Richard Mallory's vehicle. According to Tyria, she never asked whose car Aileen was driving or why. They threw their bags into the car and went to Burleigh Avenue to an apartment. Tyria recalls what happened that day when questioned by the prosecutor.
Can you describe, if you would, what type of vehicle it was that you moved with. And first of all, was it your car?
No.
Did you ever see that car before that day?
No, hadn't.
Did you ever see that car after that date?
A photograph of it.
But physically, in Miss Wuornos' possession or your own?
No, I never saw it after that day.
Now, before you moved, did you have to get ready to move? I mean, were you expecting to move on that date?
Not on that particular day, no.
Okay, were your bags packed and ready to go?
There was some things packed because we had planned on moving.
And can you describe to us what, if anything, occurred during the process of your moving?
We took all of our possessions and put them in the car and moved them over to Burley Avenue.
Did the defendant, Ms. Wuornos, tell you at that time where she had been during the morning hours before you woke up?
No.
Did she tell you about anything that had happened?
No.
Did she say anything to her, to you about anything odd happening or anything horrible happening?
Objection has been answered and leave, Your Honor. You can answer the question again.
No.
And was the move pretty much a routine move from the Ocean Shore Motel to the Burley Avenue address?
Yes.
During that time, can you tell us how you got there? You used this particular vehicle we're talking about?
Yes, we did.
And who drove it? Who drove the car?
Lee did.
And can you describe how she was driving?
Just regularly driving.
Nothing abnormal about it?
No.
Can you describe it, if you will, please? Describe Lee Wuornos as you observed her after you woke up, before you moved to the Burley Avenue from the Ocean Shore Motel. As best you can, what do you recall that morning to be like, in your own words?
Very busy getting stuff out of the motel room, moving it into the car. She seemed fine. She was able to help. You know, she helped me pack the rest of the stuff, and we both packed the car.
Did she seem to you as if she had been drinking?
Yeah, I knew she had been drinking. I could smell it on her.
Is that the fact that you could smell alcohol on her seem to be affecting her behavior?
Not really.
When you spoke to each other, did she seem to answer you back in a coherent fashion? Do you understand her speech pattern?
Yeah.
Was there anything about her actions that morning that you could tell this jury about that was out of the ordinary for the relationship that you and she had at that time of your life?
Not that I recall.
And then did you accomplish that move that morning and go to the Burley Avenue?
Yes.
What, if anything, did you do after you got to the Burley Avenue address? Did you unpack your bags?
No, because I had to go to work.
Okay. And did Ms. Wuornos say anything about the car, how she had gotten it at that point, or what she needed to do with it?
No.
How did you get to it?
I rode our moped that we had.
Okay. And who had the car?
Lee did.
Did you see what Lee did with the car? In other words, was the car still at the Burley Avenue address when you left, or had she already driven home?
Well, she had to take me back up to the Ocean Shore Motel to get the moped because it was still up there.
And did she drive you back from the Burley Avenue to the Ocean Shore?
Yes.
And during that period of time, did you have any difficulty driving?
No.
Did she tell you anything out of the ordinary about how the last couple of days of your life had been, or the night before?
Objection leading has to be overruled.
Did you say anything about what had been going on, say, within the last 24 hours of her life?
No.
Now, did it come a point then that you took the moped and you went off to work?
Yes, I did.
And how late did you stay at work that day, if you recall?
I believe I was working 9 to 5 at that time.
And after you got off work, where did you go?
To the Burley Avenue house.
At that time, did you see that same automobile again that you had used to move?
No.
Did you ever physically see it again after you went off, as Lee took you to the hotel to pick up the moped?
No.
When you got home, was there anyone present at the apartment? Was this a home or an apartment?
It was a garage converted into an apartment, so I guess it was...
Was anyone there when you got back?
I don't remember. I don't believe so.
Did there come a point in time that evening when you saw Lee Wuornos again?
Yes.
Can you describe how that came about?
I don't remember. I really don't remember if she was home when I got home from work or if she came in later.
Anything occurred when she came home? Out of the ordinary?
When later that evening, I know we were sitting watching TV, and she told me she had something to tell me.
Hey, can you describe how she was acting when she, before you tell us what she told you, where was she and where were you, if you remember? What were you all doing? Just watching TV?
We were sitting on the floor watching TV.
Okay. Were there anything unusual going on at that time, other than just sitting there in an apartment together watching some TV?
No.
Okay. Can you describe her appearance at that time?
She seemed fine.
Was there anything particularly different or the same about her as when you had left her to go to work?
She was the same.
Same basic physical appearance?
Yes.
She told you that there was something that she wanted to tell you?
Correct.
Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how that conversation began and what transpired?
We were sitting on the floor watching TV, and she just come out and said, "I have something to tell you." And I asked her what, and she said that she had shot and killed a man that day.
Did you say anything to her when she told you that?
No, I didn't want to believe it. I was probably in awe.
Did you say anything to her? Like, I don't believe you, or what, I don't want to use vulgarity. I mean, what's going on here?
I'm sure I probably replied something.
Did you ask her anything about what she had just told you, that she had shot a man?
I don't believe I asked her any questions about it. I might have replied something like, "I don't believe you," or something along that line.
Did she say anything else at that point?
Later she was telling me that she had put the body in the woods under a piece of rug, and that she had dropped a car off up in Ormond Beach around John Anderson Drive.
Did she tell you that the man she had shot, she had taken his car, and that was the car you used to move with?
Objection, Your Honor. Overruled.
Did she tell you anything about the car in relationship to the man she had shot?
I believe she did at one point.
Was it your understanding, based upon what she was telling you, that it had been the man that had gotten shot, whose car you guys had been in that day?
Yes, it was.
Did she tell you anything about why she shot the man?
No.
Now, during that evening, as this conversation was going on, did you continue to watch TV?
Yes, I believe so.
Did the defendant continue to watch TV after she told you she just shot a man and had taken his car? You had been in it?
Objection, Your Honor. Overruled.
Can you repeat the question, please?
I'm trying to understand what is happening in that apartment, in that garage, as you're being told by this defendant that she shot a man. Can you just describe that in your own words?
We were just sitting around watching TV, drinking a few beers. It was
That's when she told
typical evening.
Now, when you packed up to move to the Burley Avenue, did you pretty much know what kind of articles you each owned? You've been living together for how long at that point?
At that point, it was approximately 3.5 years.
And did Ms. Wuornos have any articles at that time, that evening, that were not something that you had seen before?
Yes.
Can you describe to the jury how you noticed that, you made that observation?
Well, I knew that they didn't belong to us.
Okay, can you describe what you saw?
There's only a few things that I can really remember from the particular cars, because she had given me a jacket and a scarf.
Let's talk specifically about what you remember. Don't speculate. Try as best you can. What do you remember seeing, and what do you remember about that evening?
I remember a box with a bunch of papers in it.
Did you look at the papers at all, or see anything, or notice anything about them?
I wasn't really paying attention. She was going through them, and she tried to show me a piece of paper and a picture of somebody, and I didn't want to look at it.
Did she tell you the picture was the man she'd shot?
I believe she did.
Only 2 days later, Richard's car was found abandoned. On December 13th, his body was finally discovered a few miles away from his car in the woods. Aileen had shot him twice in the left lung, leaving him to slowly bleed to death. Over a year later, Aileen decided to get rid of the gun she used on Richard Mallory, tossing it into the Rose Bay, near the motel she was residing in at that time. Later, Tyria led authorities to the area where Aileen dumped the weapon. The grooves in the gun were like the markings found on the fatal bullets. It was argued in court by an expert that it was a fairly common gun and bullets that a lot of people own. Therefore, it could not be proven beyond a reasonable doubt to be the weapon used to kill Richard Mallory. In the spring of 1990, David Andrew Spears was 47 years old and working in construction in Winter Garden, west of downtown Orlando. On May 19th of that year, he was reported as a missing person. A few weeks went by, and on June 1st, his body was found, bare-boned except for a baseball cap, along U.S. Route 19 in southwest Citrus County, Florida. A .22 pistol was used to shoot him 6 times in the torso. Charles Edmund Carskaddon was 40 years old and worked part-time at rodeos. Charles was last seen when he left his home in his Cadillac, hitting the highway to Tampa on May 31st. A few days after David Spears' body was found, Charles's body was discovered on June 6th in Pasco County. He had been killed in late May. Aileen had taken the time to wrap his body up in an electric blanket and covered it with copious amounts of uprooted tall grass. Charles's body was in a terrible state of decomposition when found. He was shot 9 times in his lower chest and upper abdomen with a .22 pistol. His car had been red-tagged by the Florida Highway Patrol, and on June 13th it was towed, but later police recovered it and impounded it as evidence. The beginning of summertime in Florida, June of 1990, Peter Abraham Siems was a retired 65-year-old business seaman. His bags were packed and he was saying goodbye for now to Jupiter, Florida. He was looking forward to retirement in Arkansas. Unfortunately, he would never make it out of Florida alive. His vehicle was discovered in Orange Springs, Florida on July 4th, 1990. Tyria and Aileen were spotted ditching Peter's car together, but only Eileen's palm print would be found on the door handle inside of the car. An eyewitness, Rhonda Bailey, saw Aileen and Tyria get into a car accident and reported it to the police. Later, Tyria would conveniently claim she did not know this car belonged to a victim. Aileen pleaded with eyewitness Rhonda not to report the accident to police, saying her father lived just up the road. Tyria and Aileen got back into the 1988 Sunbird Pontiac with the intention of leaving as fast and as far as it would take them. It had a smashed windshield and was badly damaged. the gray four-door Sunbird wouldn't get them very far. Eventually, the two ditched it not far from Rhonda's house and took off walking. Orange Springs volunteer fire department worker Hubert Hewitt sprang into action after getting a call about the accident. He came across Aileen and Tyra walking alongside the road and asked them if they were the ones who were involved in the accident. He was concerned they needed medical assistance. Aileen said no and that they did not want any help. Hubert went about his way, as did Aileen and Tyra. Marion County Sheriff's deputies found the car with the broken glass and shattered windshield. There were noticeable bloodstains all over the inside of the car, and the license plate was missing. A computer search based on the VIN number revealed to authorities that the car belonged to Peter Siems, who had been reported as endangered and missing. That is the event that started the media frenzy and call to action to locate the two women who matched the description Rhonda gave. The constant media attention scared Tyra into vacating Florida to go live with her sisters in Pennsylvania. To this date, Peter's body has never been found. 50-year-old Troy Eugene Burress was from Ocala, Florida, and sold sausages for a living. Troy took off on his delivery route from Gilchrist Sausage early on the morning of July 30th and never returned back to work. Gilchrist Sausage manager Johnny May Thompson started calling around that afternoon and found out that Troy failed to show up at his last few delivery stops. Late that night, Johnny May and her husband were feeling anxious, so they went out searching high and low for Troy. At 2 a.m., Troy Burress's wife could not wait any longer and reported her husband missing. At 4 in the morning, Marion County Sheriff's deputies would discover Troy's truck on the shoulder of State Road 19, which is 20 miles east of Ocala. His vehicle was unlocked, and the keys were unaccounted for, as was Troy. On August 4th, Troy's lifeless body was found on the side of State Road 19 in the woods in Marion County. His body was discovered by a family who were just out enjoying a picnic in the Ocala National Forest. They stumbled upon his body off Highway 19, about 8 miles away from where his truck had been located. He was horribly decomposed, but evidence proved he had been shot 2 times, once in the chest and once in the back. In September of 1990, Aileen ran into trouble yet again with another man. 56-year-old Charles Richard Humphreys, a former state child abuse investigator, a respected retired U.S. Air Force major, and former chief of police, was found in Marion County, deceased on September 12th. Charles had been shot 6 times from his head to his torso, and he had all of his clothes on. His car was found at a different location in Suwannee County. A 62-year-old trucker, security guard, and reserve policeman Walter Gino Antonio was found deceased, shot 4 times in the back and head. Walter was nearly nude by an isolated logging road in Dixie County. In Brevard County, his car had been discovered abandoned 5 days after his body was found. Police began finding material possessions belonging to the victims at nearby pawn shops. Eileen's fingerprint was found on a pawn shop receipt, which was a match to the print in Peter Siems' car. This is when law enforcement began the hunt for Aileen Carol Wuornos. On January 5th, 1991, two undercover cops, Mike Joyner and Dick Martin, posed as drug dealers from Georgia who called themselves Bucket and Drums. On January 8th, they saw Aileen at the Port Orange pub in the late hours of the evening. The undercover police and authorities working the case had not planned to take Aileen down right away. They needed their case to be airtight. Suddenly, Mike and Dick were thrown for a loop when Port Orange police officers came into the bar and took Aileen outside. At the Pirates Cove Motel is where law enforcement officials from 6 jurisdictions were stationed to work on the case. Undercover cop Mike anxiously called their command post at the motel to see what was going on with the Port Orange police barging in and escorting Aileen out of the bar. From there, Bob Kelly of the Volusia County Sheriff's Office telephoned the Port Orange police and advised them not to take Aileen into custody for any reason whatsoever. This message was given to the Port Orange police right in time, and Aileen was allowed to go back inside the pub. Bucket and Drums started casually talking to Aileen, buying her a few rounds of beers. Around 10 that night, they were all leaving the bar. Aileen turned down Drums and Bucket's offer of letting them drive her to the next bar. Instead, she decided to take a stroll by herself to the next bar. And again, Mike and Dick almost had their plans ruined. 2 officers from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement leisurely began trailing behind Aileen with their headlights off. The authorities at the motel found out that the FDLE were lingering behind Aileen and called them immediately, demanding them to stop following her. The police told the Florida Department of Law Enforcement officers to back down and let Aileen get to her next location, which was the biker bar, the Last Resort. Mike Joyner and Dick Martin, Drums and Buckets, met Aileen at the Last Resort where they would drink more beers together and shoot the breeze for a while. Drums and Bucket were hoping to get her to talk a little about her crime spree. The 2 undercover cops left just after midnight. Aileen didn't go anywhere. Her last night of independence was spent sleeping on an old car seat in the Last Resort bar. The next evening, Mike and Dick returned to the Last Resort as Bucket and Drums. They were wearing wires as they again chatted with Aileen. Law enforcement was able to hear the entire conversation between the 3. The plan was to take her down later on that night, but the Last Resort was setting up for a huge barbecue feast. Tons of bikers were about to swarm the bar very soon. The decision was made at the command post to go ahead with the arrest immediately. Mike and Dick asked Aileen if she'd like to come to their motel room and clean up. She said yes, and the 3 exited the bar together. Outside on the steps, Larry Horzeppa of the Marion County Sheriff's Office strode towards Aileen, telling her she was under arrest for an outstanding warrant for when she was using her grandparents' daughter's name, Lori Grody. They didn't say anything at all about any murders, and there was no mention to media outlets that a suspect was in custody. As of this moment, they didn't have a weapon tying Aileen to the crimes, and they didn't know the whereabouts of Tyria Moore. Florida police officers tracked down Tyria in Scranton, Pennsylvania, soon after Aileen was in custody, and got in touch with Tyria on January 9, 1991. She told them she would travel back to Florida to clear herself of any criminal allegations, including murder. When Tyria got back to Florida, the authorities put her under their supervision at a motel. Detectives arranged a few recorded phone calls between Tyria and Aileen, in which Tyria began trying to get Aileen to say she was not involved because the police wanted so badly for Tyria to be prosecuted as well. Tyria wanted to secure immunity for herself, and the only way to get that immunity was for Aileen to admit in the secretly recorded phone calls Tyria wasn't involved and never killed anyone. It took a while, but finally, Aileen did just what Tyria and the police were waiting on: the smoking gun.
I love you a lot.
I don't know whether I should keep on living or if I should...
No, Ty, listen. Ty, listen.
What?
I will cover you because you are not in trouble. You're innocent.
I know I am.
I'm not going to let you go to jail or anything. Listen, if I have to confess, I will.
On January 16th, 1991, Aileen told everything, her version of events. She relayed the final moments of each of her victims. She made it clear that in each incident, she was merely defending herself. She was convinced she was going to die. As mentioned in Part 1, could this have been a situation where a woman thinks the police will understand this was, according to her, all in self-defense? Was she all too eager to tell her truth, only for it to lead her straight to prison? Or was she so arrogant she believed she could manipulate herself out of this predicament? Do you believe Aileen was mentally and emotionally capable of committing cold-blooded murder? Time and time again during her repeated confessions to police, at trial, and in interviews, she kept to her story of self-defense. However, during the trial, all of the times she mentioned self-defense in her confession to police, which was on video and audio, was conveniently left out during the playing of the recordings. A reporter watched the video of Aileen confessing to authorities, and they counted over 100 times that the word self-defense was said by Aileen. In Part 3, the episode that will wrap up this series, I'll go over her psychological evaluations, being adopted while awaiting trial for the murder of Richard Mallory, the trial, appeals, the death penalty, and Aileen's last few interviews before her execution. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, y'all stay safe out there and take care.